Hi everyone. So we're going to pick up where we left things in part 3 of this series, and I'm going to show how I put a few finishing touches on the assembly of this truck, including the tailgate, and I'm going to start with the controls for the dumping mechanism. Since this is a split stream truck, there are going to be 2 sets of controls, one for each side of the tailgate. I started with the handles on the right side because I knew they'd be easier to make. These handles are a bit longer and simpler to make, so all I had to do was cut them to shape and put them together. The rear handle raises the tailgate. The forward handle pushes the wall back to expel the food waste. The left side handles were a bit more complicated. Now I have no idea why they have a totally different style of handle on each side of the truck, but I guess that's why I'm not an engineer. All I did here was make a rough copy of what I saw out of evergreen plastic. Once the handles were assembled, I attached them to an unused piece taken from the kit. Then I attached it to the truck. This footage is missing because I forgot to film it. On some trucks, there's a fiber skirt on the right side, which is supposed to prevent small rocks and stuff from being kicked up and hitting the guy on the back. To make this, I took an angle piece and glued toothbrush bristles to it. At the time, I thought that this was a brilliant idea. Unfortunately, these didn't stay in place long, and the bristles quickly started falling out. In the end, I replaced them with some static grass. Immediately in front of this was going to be the toolbox. This is where we keep spill kits and a few other useful items. Construction here was pretty simple and straightforward, using the same methods that I've used to build other parts of this truck. I probably should have modeled it with the door open, but I don't feel like rebuilding this part, so I'm going to leave it just the way it is. And after that, I made a bracket for the fire extinguisher and placed it just in front of the toolbox. Of course, no truck is complete without a good set of mud flaps. To make them, I cut up some sailcloth that I borrowed from a wooden model ship kit and fixed it to an evergreen angle piece. After that, I brushed on a few layers of diluted matte medium and then painted them black and attached them to the truck. Then I got to work on another essential tool. It's good to keep a hockey stick handy to clear out any waste that gets stuck in the truck's pinch points and to scrape off shit and other stuff that gets stuck in places where it shouldn't be. Next came the grab handles. I made these by simply bending styrene rods into shape, and then I glued them into position. Doing this job is like playing a game of the floor is lava for about 12 hours, and you'll spend most of your day standing on a steel step. To make the step, I started out by building a frame out of styrene. Then, I added a couple of lips to support the part of the step that folds out. This'll come in handy later. Then, after cutting out the surface, I marked a series of dots and then punched out holes using a punch and die set. Then I glued the surface to the frame. Now I needed to make the folding extension for the step. For this, I used the same process as with the rest of the step, first building the frame and then gluing on the surface. With the extension complete, I attached it to the rest of the step and then attached it to the truck. Now at this point, I'm going to take a minute to talk about the operations of the truck and how it works. Since I'm shooting out of sequence here, don't be alarmed to see the truck partially painted. That will be in a future video. Now, one thing about doing a garbage run on a split truck is that you will be loading more tonnage than the truck was designed for. 6 to 7 tons is recommended, but in reality, we would load between 8 and 11 tons in a single trip. On a country run especially, you would want to try and get the entire run on in a single load, because a drive to the dump and back could mean losing an hour or more each way. So you want to pack everything onto the truck if possible. Now what's working against you is that as you load more garbage onto the truck, pressure will start to build up and push back as you pack more in. Things will start to feel different after about the halfway point. You'll have to hold the handle to force it in. The handle will start to stick after the cycle is finished, and there'll be more and more resistance until finally something has to give way, and the tailgate pops open, spilling garbage out onto the street. When this happens, it's pretty much guaranteed to ruin your day. Now, to make this happen to my truck, I needed to build a structure that would allow the tailgate to rest in the correct position. To get the correct position, I first measured the angle that I wanted the tailgate to sit at and started cutting plastic accordingly. The reason I selected this angle is because of the way that this malfunction works. When the tailgate lock fails and pops open, the packing mechanism continues to operate, which raises the tailgate open even further. This, combined with the pressure from the garbage that has already been packed into the truck, forces it open a little bit more. This is another good reason not to bypass any safety mechanisms. If your hands are holding the buttons down as the mechanism is packing, this will mean that your hands are near the controls at the crucial moment when you can still prevent the tailgate from popping open. With the proper angle decided, I began building a structure that would hold the tailgate in this position. After cutting the plastic, I glued it all into place. This should be strong enough to hold everything in place once it's all complete. I won't, however, be attaching the tailgate just yet. That will be in a later video. I will, however, test fit it to see how it looks, and right now I'm happy with it. I also needed to make the seal. This is a rubber piece that prevents juices and stuff from dripping and squirting out the back. Of course, like any other part of a truck, it wears down over time, so on older trucks, stuff will drip and squirt anyway, especially if there's significant pressure behind it. Now, one thing I wasn't really happy with was the exhaust that came with the kit, and I just had to do something about that. At first, I tried soldering a new one together out of brass pipe, but I wasn't exactly thrilled with that one either. So, I made another one out of plastic tube. The angled parts were easy enough, I just had to cut them in the right way. To get the bend at the top, I used a pipe bending tool, which is meant for metal pipes, and it's about half as good for plastic tubing. To make the heat shield, I cut some plastic, marked where all the holes were going to be, and used my tap and die set to make the perforations. Off camera, I wrapped the plastic around a pencil and clamped it in place with rubber bands and then let it sit for a few days. Then, I drilled holes in all the places where I needed to and inserted some plastic rods as pegs and installed the exhaust stack, along with some additional supports. Finally, I attached the heat shield. And that's where I'm going to leave things for now. There's still one or two things I could add, but if I do, that will appear in a later video. To be honest, I kind of miss working on these trucks, and it's nice to build a model of something that I have real-life experience with. In the next episode, I'll be talking about more scenery, including how I made sumacs and this tacky wishing well. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, and I'll be back soon with more stuff.